Welcome, everyone, to the Roots of Our Being global experience, in which our journey to the past becomes our quest for the future. Together, we will reconnect with our ancient wisdom and heritage in remembrance of our true spirit and essence. As our modern day structures dissolve, now is the time to invite and welcome in the powerful stories of the soul's journey of remembrance and renewal. I'm your host for this event, Amanda Kolbaba, and today I'm very excited to present Jocelyn Starfeather. Welcome, Jocelyn. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for having me here. I am delighted to be a part of your gathering.
Before we dive into your fascinating discussion, I'd like to say a few words about you. Jocelyn Starfeather is a visibility and thought leadership coach for visionary entrepreneurs, spiritual alchemist, astrologer, and founder of the Sacred Planet. She shares shamanic and ancient wisdom to guide courageous seekers in co-creating a revolutionary new world in alignment with Mother Earth and the vast intelligence of the cosmos. After a successful 15-year corporate career working in finance for major multinational companies, Jocelyn was thrust into a deep spiritual awakening. It was that awakening that turned her life upside down and from which she emerged with a powerful understanding of how to use her intuition and healing abilities, aspects of herself that she never had access to before. She dove deeply into earth-based and shamanic practices, and she has studied alongside elders and wisdom keepers ever since. She has extensively studied ancient civilizations, especially cultures where the goddess held a strong presence. And she has spent profound and life-changing time in the ancient temples and pyramids of Egypt, the sacred sites of Greece, and the lands of the ancient Mayans. Jocelyn blends alchemy, astrology, hermeticism, ancient and indigenous wisdom, and a magical shamanic perspective to coach and guide visionary entrepreneurs, revolutionaries, and change makers all around the world. Her title of topic for today, the Eleusinian Mysteries of Ancient Greece, the eternal life and light of our soul. My first question for you, Jocelyn, what were the Eleusinian Mysteries and where were they held?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you again, Amanda, for having me here and for the wonderful introduction. It's always such a pleasure to speak with you and so excited about this event, The Roots of Our Being. It's super beautiful.
Thank
So
you for being with us.
yeah. Yes. Well, the Eleusinian Mysteries are such an amazing topic to dive into. So I have created some slides, a little presentation, because I found that, it's so helpful to see the imagery from ancient Greece and to really dive into all of that. And I even have some images from Egypt at the very beginning to set the stage for what happens later in Greece. So if it's okay with you, I will share my screen.
Yes, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Here we go. All right, wonderful. So as I said, I'm going to start briefly in Egypt here for just a moment, because when we go really, really, really far back, we find ourselves in Egypt and we find ourselves with these mystery school teachings that were held in all of the ancient cultures around the world in one form or another. But in Egypt, we find some of the most ancient records of this happening. So here on this slide, we have the great goddess Isis here on the right. She is wrapping her wings around her husband, Osiris, who's here. And the king at the time is making a necklace offering to them in this scene. But Isis and Osiris are the holders of these deep, profound mysteries that remind us that death is never an ending, death is always a new beginning, and that we as humans and we as part of life are always in this continual cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth, and that there is nothing to be afraid of, and that the soul is eternal. And so this is a deep mystery, and this is something that we as humans have always wondered about, right? We have many different religions that we've created through the ages to answer or try to answer these questions. Now, the Great Pyramids here at Giza, for example, were this incredible technology. They were not tombs, they were resurrection chambers. They were these powerful structures that allowed initiations to occur inside, where the human beings in Egypt, it was usually either the pharaoh or the high priest or high priestess, would leave the physical body, travel out into the immortal stars, and there's documentation of this in many of the ancient Egyptian texts. They knew how to travel out to the immortal stars, commune with the gods, commune with the divinity in the cosmos, and then come back into the body with the renewed knowledge and wisdom that they had gained from that journey, and go on to serve the people even more fully. And so we find evidence of this all over Egypt. It's truly incredible. This is a scene from Abydos Temple in Egypt, where we find the goddess Seshet here and the high priest here, both wearing the leopard skin robe. Now you can see that for both of them, they have the paws of the leopard coming down here on the edges of the robe, and also here on their upper arms, the upper paws. This is the leopard skin robe. Now the spots on the leopard skin represent the stars in the sky. And the only ones who could wear this leopard skin robe in ancient Egypt were those who had undergone the most rigorous initiation, which was the resurrection ceremony, learning how to leave the body, travel out into the stars, and come back in. Now, my teacher, Patricia Alyan, layman in Egypt, says that as our consciousness fell, we lost the ability to leave the body and travel out to the stars and know how to come back in. And so as we look at the far, far ancient times, we see these texts, we see this evidence that they knew how to do this. They knew how to work with the technology of the body, the technology of the stars to do these incredible things that we can't even imagine today. But then we had this drop in consciousness, and now we're in this time today where we can't imagine how that could happen. But they were doing it before. Here's a couple of other images. The lotus flowers were surely involved in some way in these ceremonies. And in fact, as our consciousness fell, we probably needed to use psychedelics or entheogens to actually facilitate that journey, whereas before we had done it purely through our consciousness. This is a scene in Abydos Temple where we see Thoth, the god of many things, including alchemy and magic, assisting King Seti I with coming back into his body from the resurrection ceremony by offering him the Ankh symbol here. So those are some images from Egypt to give you an idea of how ancient this resurrection ceremony is. Now, the Eleusinian Mysteries are the resurrection ceremony as well. It is the Greek version. It is a more, we could say, modern version of it than what they were practicing in far, far ancient Egypt. And an interesting thing to note is that in Egypt, that resurrection ceremony was held very sacred, very secret. It was reserved for only a few very high initiates like the pharaohs and the high priests and high priestesses. But when it was later shared in Greece, it was shared much more widely. And so the Eleusinian Mysteries were an adaptation of that resurrection ceremony from Egypt, also merged with some of the indigenous traditions from the people who were originally indigenous to Greece. And I'll say a little more about that in a minute. But the Eleusinian Mysteries in Greece were, you could attend it if you were almost anybody as a Greek citizen. So as long as you had not ever committed murder, and as long as you could speak the language of Greek and you were a Greek citizen, you could participate in the Eleusinian Mysteries. So it's interesting that it was brought in and made available to a much wider population at this more recent point in time. These are some images from ancient Greece that are depicting different scenes from the Eleusinian Mysteries, also called the Rites of Eleusis. Now, it was not only brought from Egypt, they took the teachings from Egypt and brought them to Greece, but again, like I said, they were merged with the indigenous cultures that were already in Greece, which were also practicing something similar, very focused around the great goddess and the power of the womb and the power of the earth to create new life. And again, it's all about this continual cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth. So we need to mention in any discussion of the Eleusinian Mysteries, the Neolithic goddesses. And these goddesses, they are the ultimate in fertility. They are the womb. They are this portal through which new life is birthed. And they also hold the secrets and the mysteries of death and walking on both sides of the veil. So these incredible statues here are from the island of Crete. They are the Minoan serpent goddesses, and you can see just how powerful they are. They're incredibly powerful. Now, these are actually only about 13 inches high. They're smaller than they might appear. But that's because their power is so big. And they're from about 1600 BC. So these are showing us more about the original indigenous and Neolithic culture that existed in Greece on the mainland and also in the Greek islands, also over to Turkey and in that general Mediterranean area. Interestingly, this culture of the Neolithic goddess culture survived on the island of Crete longer than in any of the surrounding areas, probably because the island of Crete was so isolated in the middle of the Mediterranean. As the warring tribes came through that took over the other lands, they didn't get to Crete until much later. So these goddesses have a trance-like expression. You can tell that they're like not only existing in this world, but on the other side of the veil as well. And we see the serpent imagery. Um, just to mention these serpents, you can see how thin they are. This was carved out of a stone called faience, which is a very hard stone. We have no idea how they were able to make this fine of a carving out of such a hard stone without it just breaking. It's incredible that these were created and still exist. They were found in this underneath of this collapsed building that was probably a temple space originally, under the central sanctuary of Knossos on Crete. So we have the serpent imagery. This one is holding the serpents. This one has the serpents winding down her arms and around her womb. We also have the imagery of the lion. So both the serpent and the lion were key to the Neolithic goddess cultures representing the power of the feminine. And just another image from that more indigenous culture that came before in the Greek area. This is the unnamed goddess. So she is the personification of nature. And this is how people would greet her. So if you were out in nature in ancient Greece and you saw the sunrise, there was this epiphany gesture that essentially was honoring the goddess, but she didn't even need a name because she's everywhere. She's in every plant, every animal, every sunrise, every cloud. You know, she is this powerful being. These are called Carfi goddess statues, but the goddess's name wasn't Carfi. That was just the name that was given to it by archaeologists to these statues. And these are from about 1200 to 1100 BC. So you can see the power of the Neolithic cultures that came first. Now, the Eleusinian Mysteries were practiced from at least as far back as 600 BC, probably much further back than that. But that's what we have definite evidence of all the way up until 394 AD, when the Emperor Theodosius came through and shut down all the pagan temples, unfortunately, at that time. And as I've mentioned, these mysteries were emerging of the far ancient indigenous rituals and ceremonies with the resurrection rituals of Egypt. And in the image here, these are initiates of the Eleusinian Mysteries holding dragonfly wands. Isn't that so beautiful? The dragonfly symbolizes the eternal resurrection of the soul. So that was why this was part of that ceremony. Now, there were 2 times per year that the mysteries were held, and there were the lesser mysteries that were held near the spring equinox, and that was a shorter ceremony. The greater mysteries are the ones that we have the most information about. They were held over 9 days near the autumn equinox, and it was quite a long and involved process of initiation. And they were held near Athens, Greece. They would actually have a procession starting in Athens and then going to Eleusis, which you can still visit today. It's called Eleusis, or in Greek, it's pronounced Eleusina. And it was a city, I believe, about 12 miles away from Greece. So they would have this procession from Athens. So it would have this procession of all the initiates from Athens over to Eleusina, crossing over 2 rivers, which is very symbolic about the eternal nature of the soul. And a lot more, of course, happen in the procession. And all of the initiates who wished to experience the greater mysteries had to first take part in the lesser mysteries in the springtime. So this is actually an image from Eleusis. I got to visit there 1 time so far. And this was a picture that was one of the artifacts there that you can see on the grounds. And so this is something that we don't know for sure. Now, there are a lot of facts about the Eleusinian mysteries that we have some evidence of, but not complete clarity, because the people who underwent the mysteries, who underwent the ceremony, were sworn to secrecy. They were not allowed to talk about it. And it was actually upon penalty of death. If anyone found out that you had taken part in the greater mysteries and then you were blabbing about it, you could be killed. So that was upholding some of the secrecy of the ancient Egyptian, but in a different way, because the whole population could attend, but then they had to be silent about it. So we don't know for sure what was in the Kykeon. And this was the ritual drink that all the initiates partook in. But we do know that they all drank the Kykeon. That much is confirmed. We just don't know exactly what was in it. So it's likely that it was some sort of a psychedelic substance. We don't know if it had psilocybin mushrooms, or if it had a substance called ergot, or it very likely did have poppies in it, because we find a lot of poppies in the imagery around Demeter. So some combination of these things that assisted in opening the minds of the participants to this journey between life and death that were revealed during the ceremonies. So this was probably a vessel related to the Kykeon there at Eleusis temple site. I'll pause for a second, Amanda. Did you have any questions? I know I've been talking for a while.
Oh, it's been great. Thank you. It's been so fascinating. I just started taking it all in. Um, I do. I know you may have spoken about, but if we could just maybe clarify a bit, why was it so important for the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Greeks to, sorry, my younger cat loves the energy. Every interview,
Oh,
he's
I
just been
see.
coming in at some point. He's all excited right now.
Yes, cats are welcome.
Yeah. Yes, he's been a major sort of feature in almost every interview, not quite all.
That's so
It's
cool.
like, I want to be a part of this. Um, why were, and even now a little bit too, why were the ancient Egyptians and ancient Greeks so, and other indigenous ancient cultures around the world, so interested in life after death, that whole ritual? Can you talk a little bit about like the importance of that and why they, did these rituals? um
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, for, to answer that question, I have to first say we don't know for sure, right? A lot of that is lost to the ages as far as how all of this got started, because like so much of what is written in ancient Egypt and ancient Sumeria and ancient Peru, they all had these incredible rituals and ceremonies around that meeting point of life and death, and how do we work with that. And many of these cultures seem to have just appeared out of nowhere around 3000 BC, right? Fully formed with like in Egypt, the hieroglyphic texts in all their perfection and detail, and incredibly profound rituals. Like I said, one of these texts is the pyramid text in Saqqara that we find in the Pyramid of Unas. And it literally talks about this journey of the king, the pharaoh, um, his soul leaving the physical plane and traveling up. And it's kind of like he has to make it to the Orion constellation and then leap up to the immortal stars, which are the stars in the north, including the Big Dipper. And it tells this journey. And so we don't know for sure the original basis of this, but what we can guess is that it probably came from an even more ancient culture, that the memory or the artifacts from that have been lost or not, or at least not yet discovered in our modern times. And I believe that we once held extremely advanced technology to know how to work with both life and death in an extremely powerful way. And that at a certain point way back, we were not afraid of death because we understood that death is never an ending. And maybe we were more easily able, with a higher state of consciousness, to walk on both sides of the veil, just as we see that the ancient Egyptians were doing, for example, here. And this is certainly the biggest question that we have as humans, even still today, right? What happens when we die? And there are people now today that we can hear about having near-death experiences and telling about a kind of a similar story to what these people were experiencing in the Eleusinian Mysteries, that death is not an ending, that we go to this beautiful place and these most incredible beings meet us and we have, an exalted experience. So I think this is, humanity trying to remember who we really are, trying to keep these rituals and ceremonies going that remind us that we don't need to be afraid of death, that we are so much more eternal and immortal, than we could possibly know in this human physical form. So that's my, that's my understanding of it. And as I mentioned near the beginning, so many religions have been created trying to answer these same questions. So they are just such core and key questions for us as human beings.
Yes, that was perfect. Thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful. And I agree with you too. And for myself personally, it's like, the ancients were trying to stay connected to maybe other places that they had come from, and that, we're just visiting Mother Earth. We're just experiencing her, but we don't stay. We're meant to go and explore. And we've had so many other lifetimes in other places around the galaxy and other places to explore. So it's quite fascinating. And I understand like them wanting to keep that connection and remember. And I think that's what we're all trying to do right now, is remember ourselves. Like, we've lost so much parts of ourselves. And that goes into my next question. Is you mentioned about our consciousness dropping or falling. Can you talk about why that occurred? What happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that we see evidence of all around the world. And I'll stop sharing for a moment just to be full screen for the share. So if we look at, for example, um, ancient megalithic structures like Sacsayhuaman in Peru, like the pyramids at Giza, like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, These are extremely ancient structures. We can include Stonehenge. We can include many others. I could go on with a long, long list. We have no idea how people created these structures with the technology that we today have evidence that they had, like bronze tools at those times, for example. The level of precision in the stonework is beyond belief. It's actually, there have been many projects or, ventures where people today in the modern world, with all of the tools and the, heavy machinery that we have tried to create something as fine as the pyramids of Giza or the walls of Sacsayhuaman, and we can't even today. So there was something going on that is beyond our understanding. Also, in the hieroglyphs in Egypt, this is something I've studied more extensively. We see that the original, the oldest hieroglyphs, like from the pyramid texts in the Unas pyramid, for example, those are from about 3200 BC. And they are very precise. And they are, the older hieroglyphs actually had the negative space removed. If I had a slide for this, it would be great, but I don't have it ready to pull up right now. But so that the hieroglyphs are the raised part and the rest has been removed from all around the hieroglyphs. It's very hard to do that. The later hieroglyphs we see are just kind of carved into the stone, like the indented part, was carved in. We see that in the much later hieroglyphs, maybe 1800 BC, 1500 BC, that sort of thing. So we don't know why the older structures are the highest quality and the newer structures are the ones that are falling apart. If you look at Greek or Roman temples, they're mostly falling down. But the pyramids have been there. More and more evidence is showing probably at least 10,000 years. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, we know for sure has been there 12,000 years and is still standing. So the fact that the oldest hieroglyphs are the most precise it's just a mystery. How did we have this extremely high level of craftsmanship and knowledge of resurrection ceremonies? And then later on, we lost that. We lost the ability. Today we don't know how to travel to the immortal stars. In 1500 BC, we didn't know how to travel to the immortal stars. But in 3200 BC, they were writing about that with these very, very fine glyphs. So this is the evidence that we have, but there's a lot that really points to the fact that there were extremely high levels of technology, culture, civilization, architecture, artistic ability, skilled craftsmanship that is just unequaled by anything in the more recent times. So we don't know why. There are theories about this. One theory is that our consciousness rises and falls as we travel through the great 26,000 year precessional cycles. This is something I've talked a lot about in other videos, so people can check out my YouTube channel to see more videos about that. But essentially, we know scientifically, this is a scientific fact, that the earth goes through these 26,000 year cycles. And incredibly, the ancient people, the ancient Mayans, the ancient Egyptians, the people in ancient India and Tibet were measuring these great year calendars, these 26,000 year calendars. And what it seems like is as we go through these 26,000 year cycles, at some points our consciousness is very high. We can see that probably about 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, when many of these very, very fine megalithic structures that I mentioned were built, we were at an extremely high level of consciousness, and that there's been a fall since then. So one of the theories about this is, the Earth and the sun and the entire solar system is moving around the Milky Way galaxy, covering just huge expanses of space. Our whole solar system is moving. And so one theory is that as we move through the galaxy, we're coming into different fields of energy. We're coming into different parts of the cosmos. So every 12,000 years, when we go through that high consciousness area over there, then we're building pyramids and doing incredible things. And as we move away from that place, we fall in consciousness. So what could be happening now is that we're coming back into a high consciousness area, right? And so we are raising our consciousness, we are remembering, we have this huge curiosity and longing now to go to the sacred sites, to decode what the ancient people knew, to understand what the hieroglyphs says, the hieroglyphs said, or what the ancient Sumerian texts say, or what Stonehenge means for us. We have this longing. So that is a sign that our consciousness is raising again now. And that's what I think is happening on the earth right now. The interesting thing about that is it's not only happening on Earth, but it's happening on all the planets in our solar system. It's happening for our sun. Our sun's at solar maximum right now. That's very interesting. All these cycles concurring, and supporting us as we rise again in our consciousness. So it's a fascinating story of what can be possible.
Definitely. Yeah, we can go down the rabbit hole in
Yes.
so many different places here. It's just fascinating. Thank you for taking time to do that.
Yeah.
We can go back and because I know you had some more to discuss with the mystery traditions in ancient Greece. And I wanted to ask you if this is sort of goes with your slides.
Mhm.
And if not, that's okay. But who are Demeter and Persephone, and why are they important figures in these mysteries?
Great question. It's the
Okay.
next slide. Okay, so here is a beautiful image of goddess Demeter. Now, she's Demeter in the Greek mythology. You might see her called Ceres in the Roman mythology. They are the same. She is the earth mother goddess. Now, you can see here she's holding these shafts of wheat or grain, and she's actually holding poppy bulbs. These are poppy bulbs here. So this is one of the many indications we have that poppies were probably part of the Kykeon. And she's holding the serpents. The serpents are the symbol of the ancient feminine wisdom. And so Demeter represents the ever-changing cycles of the seasons, the ever-evolving cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth. That includes that great 26,000-year cycle. There are periods of great high consciousness and falling consciousness and rising again. It's the same. We are immersed, encapsulated in these ever-changing, ever-evolving cycles all around us within our own bodies and in the world that we see surrounding us. So Demeter represents that, these incredible changing seasons that are always shifting. And then her daughter is Persephone. So this is a statue of Persephone that's really quite fascinating. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. This is in the Heraklion Archaeological Museum on the island of Crete. So I'll tell you briefly the story of Persephone and Demeter because you need to know that as a background for these mysteries. So Demeter is this wonderful mother. She is the earth goddess, and she has a beautiful daughter, Persephone. And they are out on a beautiful spring day, just gathering flowers. They're out in the fields. It's sunny. It's lovely. And suddenly, Demeter looks around and she doesn't see her daughter with her anymore. Her daughter was just right there. Her daughter has disappeared. Now, there are some stories, some versions of this story that say that Hades, and this is Hades right here, came and abducted Persephone, took her away, stole her away to the underworld. There are other versions of the story that say that Persephone saw Hades and fell in love with him and wanted to go and live with him in the underworld. So you can choose which version of that story you like best. But in any case, Demeter could not find her daughter. She called in Zeus and Hecate and many other Hermes, many other gods and goddesses to help. And eventually they found Persephone, and she was seated on the throne of the queen of the underworld, right next to Zeus, or right next to Hades here, the king of the underworld. And she was sitting there very happily. And so Demeter wanted her daughter to come back home. And again, there's some question here. Was Hades holding her hostage, or did she want to be there? Many versions of the story say that she wanted to be there and she was very happy to be the queen of the underworld. And so they had to make a deal. And they made a deal that all the gods together decided that Persephone would stay with Hades and be the queen of the underworld for 6 months out of the year, and that she would get to go back and be with her mother, Demeter, for 6 months out of the year. Now, because Demeter is the goddess of the earth, when she's happy, when her daughter is back home with her, that's when we have the spring and summer and everything comes to life. And when she is sad and in mourning because Persephone had to leave her and go away for 6 months, that is when we have the autumn and the winter and everything dies. So that's the story, that's the basis of these mysteries. And I'll tell you more about how it ties in with the mysteries in just a minute. But what I want to say about this image, and I have included here just so everybody can reference it, what it said in the museum right next to these statues. These statues are incredible because they are showing the connection between the Greek and the Egyptian lineages. So this is a statue of Persephone, who's also known as Kor or Kora in the mythology, but this is Persephone, depicted as the Egyptian goddess Isis. And then this is Hades, or Pluto in the Roman, depicted as the Egyptian god Serapis or Osiris. So we're coming back to Isis and Osiris. That was the first slide I showed you, right? Was the Egyptian Isis and Osiris. Here they are again, but it's Persephone and Hades. Interestingly, we also have Cerberus, the three-headed dog, and in the Egyptian, that would be Anubis, who also helps people to navigate through the underworld. So I was so amazed when I found these statues in the Heraklion Archaeological Museum because it shows that merger of the Egyptian and the Greek mythology. And these are just such beautiful statues. As it says here, Persephone Isis with a covered head bears her symbols at the forehead, i.e. the crescent moon here, the solar disk, and the snake or uraeus. She is depicted holding in her right hand the sistrum. So the sistrum is this instrument of Hathor. It's a beautiful instrument that they would play during the ritual processions in ancient Egypt. So this is really powerful. So that gives you an idea of, of who Persephone is and who Demeter is, as we saw on the previous slide. And you've also met Hades as well. So this is another image of Persephone. And when the initiates would drink the Kykeon, and when they would be guided by the high priest and the high priestess in the Eleusinian Mysteries to go within themselves and to see what would be revealed to them, they would come to meet Persephone. They would get to walk through the fields with her, and they would walk with her to the other side of the veil, where she would show them that there is nothing to fear when you cross over the veil, that there is only life on both sides. Now, Persephone resides in the underworld half of each year, like I mentioned. So she represents from her underworld position the force of vegetation beneath the soil. So if we think about even in the coldest, darkest time of the winter, under the soil, everything is still alive. Everything is rejuvenating, regenerating, and getting ready to birth again, to push up the green shoots and the blossoms in the springtime. And this is the message, this is the core and key message about the eternal nature of the soul. And really all things, right? All things in our world are eternally rebirthed. That Persephone promised to the initiates when they would meet with her and see her in that mystery school state. It reminds me of something that Pat McCabe, one of my teachers here in Taos, New Mexico, would always say. She said, "The plan is life. The plan is life. Look all around you. You can see it's very clear. The plan is life," right? And so that was the same message here. There's no need to fear death. And Demeter held a key role here. I'm not going into all the details because there's so much to say, but Demeter held a key role too in meeting with the initiates as well as Persephone. And they were both guiding the initiates through these other realms. So interestingly, there were many historical figures that we still know today who took part in the Eleusinian Mysteries because everybody could take part in it. Again, as long as you were a Greek citizen, you could speak the Greek language and you had not ever killed anybody, you could take part in it. And so here's a list of some of those who did. We have Plato, Augustus, the emperor. We have Plutarch, Marcus Aurelius, an incredible, incredible mind, right? Aeschylus, Hadrian, Commodus, many other historically famous people. Many of the Greek and even Roman emperors would take part. And so we can see that this mystery school experience was highly esteemed. You know, it was very sought after. It was known that this was a powerful and life-changing experience. And I have a few quotes to finish up the slides here from people who attended the mysteries. And what's interesting is they were not allowed to speak about it. Like I said, on pain of death, could they talk about it? But many of them on their deathbed finally felt the need to say something before they passed away. They felt they had to speak about this. And that's so interesting, right? That they carried it within themselves for so many years, probably decades for most of them, and finally on their deathbed had a chance to speak about this incredible experience. So what Marcus Aurelius said was, it is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. Very profound statement from him. And I have a couple longer quotes here that I won't read all of them, but I'll read little parts. And I wanted you to have these for reference because it's so interesting. So Cicero in 58 BC said, through them, we have been tamed from a savage and base way of life and civilized toward a state of humanity. And he's talking about, when he says them, he's talking specifically about the Eleusinian Mysteries. Just as they are called initiations, so in truth we have learned from them the fundamentals of life and received the groundwork not only for living with happiness, but also for dying with better hope. And then Plutarch, around 100 AD, told actually a lot more about what the experience was, you know, this experience that you would have after drinking the Kykeon. And he said, first there was wandering and running and endless journeys through darkness and shivering, trembling, sweating in terrible awe, and then a wondrous light and purified landscapes and meadows. And this was one thing that many of the people said, is that these light-filled fields would open up for you and show you the truth of your nature. And voices and songs of sacred harmonies and holy visions. And the interesting thing about this was that Plutarch says this last sentence, so the initiates from this liberated, light-filled state look back at the multitude on earth who stampede and squabble with one another because of their fear of death and lack of faith in the good things that the next world holds. And that in and of itself is such an important message for all of us, right? Not to get caught in this stampeding and squabbling that's going on down here, which we see a lot of these days, and to really hold ourselves in the higher frequency, hold ourselves in the light, because that is what is actually true. And that's what these people learned when they went through the mysteries, and they came out of it. All of the people who spoke about it said they came out of it with a completely new perspective on life, with a completely new hope for their future, and even like Cicero said, hope for death, you know, hope for dying in a better way, because then they could no longer be afraid of it. So that's what the Eleusinian Mysteries were all about.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn, for sharing all this beautiful insight and wisdom. It's so helpful and supportive for what's going on right now, like you said. We really need to shift our perspective out of this sort of narrow tunnel that we've put ourselves into in the third dimension, and start to expand our conscious. There's so much more. And why are we fighting and bickering with each other? We all want to live and experience and enjoy life. That's what Mother Earth, I believe anyways, is all about. So thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for being here and sharing. Before we finish, because I mean we could go on for another hour, I think, but
I'm sure we could. I have no doubt.
you have a quite a generous offering for everybody. Can you give us a brief description on your free gift today?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a beautiful workshop, a video workshop that I recorded, and a shamanic journeying practice that is a journey into the sacred art and symbols and writing of ancient Egypt and magical Crete. And it's really a journey way back in history to the Paleolithic times and to the ancient goddess cultures. And I'll share with you about more of the different Neolithic goddesses and then how that came forward through Egypt and through Crete. And you will have an amazing shamanic journey to feel the power of the goddess within you. So it's really fun. Hope you'll all enjoy it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for this generous offering. And everybody can find Jocelyn's free gift in the link underneath the interview here. So please check it out. And before we go, do you have any last words of wisdom for us today? And where can we also find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. The best place to find me is on my website, which is wearesacredplanet.com. So it's WEARE, sacredplanet.com. And also on my YouTube channel. It's the Sacred Planet YouTube channel. And I am always posting new videos and new fun things on there. So yeah, come and check out my website, get some other free gifts and lots of good things to explore on there. And as far as final words, I would just echo these last sentiments that we had from these great thinkers of ancient Greece, that we are so much more than we've been told, and we have access to all the light. We have access to our immortal nature. There is no need for us to be, feeling stuck or trapped in whatever situations may be happening in our lives. And yes, we need to find a balance between the 3D and the liminal realms, but just to know that we are so powerful. We are so filled with light. We are eternal. Our soul is on a long, long journey, much longer than just this one lifetime. And so to really connect in with that power, let yourself exist in a high frequency state of being and welcome the magic into your life every day. This is how we're meant to be living in this higher state of consciousness. So I will say one more thing. We have incredible potentials opening up for us now. As I mentioned, consciousness has been falling for really many millennia, and we are at this turning around point, and we're at this point where our consciousness is rising very quickly. So the chaos that we see in the world is actually a sign of the rising consciousness, because it's the dying out of the old. We can't continue with these old structures anymore. So really trust in what's happening and let yourself rise, because that is actually what's becoming available to us, is that higher consciousness and revitalized state of being at this time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. That was perfect. And so, yeah, just so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for being with us and sharing all of this with us today. I want to thank our audience for being with us today. I hope you felt that you gained some wisdom and insight that will help support you in your journey. I wish you so much love and light. Again, thank you for being with us today. I will see you all soon. Have a gorgeous day, everyone.